I'm very proud of myself. I actually succeeded in starting a reading wrap-up streak. Hello everyone, this is everything I read in May. Kinda. I made the executive decision to split this video into two parts. Last month in April, I read 4 books and that video reached almost 30 minutes. This month, I gave a total 16 books a shot, 11 I completely read and 5 I DNF'd. It will be too long to get through everything, and even if anyone would be willing to watch an hour-long yapping session of mine, I will physically tire out. The last 8 books that I read in May are by the same author, hence it doesn't seem off if I were to give it its own spotlight. The author is none other than the mother of modern Regency romance herself, Georgette Heyer. I had so much fun reading her work and I cannot wait to talk about her, but for now, let's focus on these ones. May was honestly pretty underwhelming. I am going to sound like a hater with a lot of these books, but I promise you, I really went into every single one of these with a positive mindset and a heart full of hope. There's a lot of books to cover, so let's get to it. Starting off strong with 2 books I've had on my TBR for a couple of years already. I am talking about the book 1 and 2 of the Anne of Green Gables series by L.M. Montgomery. For those unfamiliar, Anne of Green Gables is the coming-of-age story of Anne Shirley, an orphan girl who becomes adopted by the Cuthbert siblings. The Cuthberts are unmarried and growing old, so they wanted a boy to help around the house and farm. Thanks to a misunderstanding, though, they end up with a very imaginative Anne instead. Book 1, titled Anne of Green Gables, focuses on her younger years as she tries to find her place in the small town of Avonlea. Book 2, titled Anne of Avonlea, is during her teenage years, around 16 to 17. At this point, she's become a recognized member of the town, and now she's trying to find the path she wishes to take in her life. The biggest charm of the series is Anne Shirley's heart. She is truly the queen of romanticizing life. She sees the beauty in all the little things, and as you read, you're bound to be influenced by her love for living. Actually, there was a French word that I think really describes Anne, but I don't want to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce it, so I'm just gonna put it on the screen. The imagery in these books is stunningly strong, especially in book 1. Since book 2 shows Anne maturing, she loses a bit of the energy so abundant in children. Marilla, one of the Cuthbert siblings, actually laments about this at some point. Anne retains her vibrant imagination and has become more beautiful than she once was. However, there was now a certain subduedness in her that naturally comes with growing up. Between book 1 and 2, I might have preferred book 1 more, simply because book 2 has Anne grow from child to caretaker, and I am not a kid person at all. Book 2 introduces 3 new children in Anne's life. Dora is a nice and behaved little girl, while her twin brother Davy is a big troublemaker. Now, I think children should be treated with the utmost patience and care, and that we should be gentle with them. That said, I would rather not be in the same space as a child in the first place. I was also disappointed with how Dora was framed to be dull or less lovable, simply because she was the quiet kid. They might as well just have had Davy alone. Still, I enjoyed Anne of Avonlea. I was so happy with the ending of it. Ever since this book introduced a really lovely character, I have been hoping and praying for this kind of ending, and I cried tears of joy when they delivered. Anne of Green Gables is just so heartwarming, so cozy. Reading a chapter or 2 every day can really help you take life more slowly and appreciate the world that surrounds you. I highly recommend this series, not just for young girls, but any woman who wants that spark back in their lives. I would have immediately jumped into the 3rd book of the series, except I was really scared. I was looking at some playlists for book 2, and tell me why almost every playlist has champagne problems in it. No thank you. Post Anne, I was in the mood for fantasy. That's how magical the series was. This is where the Rowan Blood series comes in. I heard of the series last year and have had it in my TBR ever since. You know when you're expecting a package, so you try to make it come faster by pretending like you're not expecting a package? That is precisely how I felt when I found out that this book has a total of 8 books planned and only 4 was out. I do not read ongoings, okay? I avoid them as much as possible, but nothing was really catching my eye, and I really wanted to read a fantasy book. Ergo, read this. This book hit me very badly, and not in a good way. Our protagonist, Saffron, is a human living in the Fae realm. Due to some history, humans in the Fae realm must live in servitude for the Fae. The Fae treat humans pretty badly, but despite that, Saffron wants to remain in the Fae realm. This is where he grew up. It's all he really knows. Unfortunately, his Fae patron is planning to send him back to the human realm. That's just his modus operandi. He typically emancipates humans under him after a couple of years. By the way, I don't actually know if I'm pronouncing his name right, because I read it as saffron, but I don't know if it's like a fancy word. Hold on, actually, I can just look it up.
Saffron.
Saffron? Oh my god, apparently it's saffron. Ron? Eh? I don't understand English, guys. Saffron now has to find a reason to stay, preferably via an academic endorsement, which is nearly impossible because as a human servant, he doesn't have access to quality education. A chance encounter with the Fae Prince Sylvan changes that. In exchange for access to the school library, yes, this is a school setting, and for an endorsement, Saffron must find a way to strip the power held over Sylvan's real name. Because when it comes to the Fae, there's no greater weakness than their real name. Saffron. It started off great. This is an enemies to lovers book, and not just in a minor, he's so annoying kind of way, but in that they tried to kill each other kind of way. The initial dynamic reminded me of Jude and Cardan from The Cruel Prince. Take that with a huge grain of salt though, as I only read up to chapter 10 of TCP. The development from enemies to reluctant partners was good. It's the enemies to lovers ride that was not. Okay, well, let me show you. We start with enemies right here. Our goal is becoming lovers right here. Like a roller coaster, the initial descent was smooth and amazing. Then suddenly an event happens and it just dips. The ride plummets. It's over, 0 survivors. Suddenly, our enemies are very sweet. There are ants everywhere. I have no idea why they're here. I fear that the catalyst for this honeymoon phase was not strong enough to warrant this change. I'm speaking really calmly right now, but when I was reading this, I was really pissed. It was so abrupt that I wondered if maybe there was a twist. Spoiler alert. There was. Except Twist did not save the relationship as it could have. That frustrated me even more. It's like watching a life vest thrown at someone drowning, yet instead of grabbing onto it, they choose to swim to shore instead. So they fucking drown. The romance was a waste. The characters were weak. We have Sylvan, who goes from prime dickhead with morals differing from humans to now being caring and apologetic, and all because of what? It felt so insincere, and the fact that the twist could have proven that, but instead the story doubled down, is so disappointing. Saffron was cute at first. He's a romantic, but god, all he thinks about is Sylvan. I think the author had all these really interesting ideas, but the execution just fell flat. It didn't come out as interesting as they might have hoped for. The grammar was occasionally messy, especially regarding participle phrases, and some scenes were just confusing. For example, in the beginning of the book, Saffron really wanted to find this human named Arrow. The humans are celebrating a religious ceremony where they get to pray for wishes, and Arrow is meant to be like a cosplayer for their god. So we need this god cosplayer to make the wishes. Like, that's very integral to the ceremony. With how the scene was written and how eager Saffron was for Arrow to return, it felt as though without Arrow, the ceremony cannot continue. Except it can. It was literally no big deal that Arrow was absent. They can just have someone else do it. Saffron ends up being the person to replace Arrow, which makes me think, oh, okay, maybe he knew that he would be the replacement and he didn't want to be the replacement, and that's why he wants Arrow back desperately. No! He knew that they could just have a replacement, but he didn't know that it was going to be him. So why did it seem like Arrow was very important to the ceremony when they weren't? Oh well, I have no plans on continuing this series. I might. Never say never. Currently though, not on the cards. Undeterred, I continued on with my fantasy hunt. I flopped hard. I ended up DNFing 3 books in a row. The first book I DNF'd was the high fantasy TikTok darling, Priory of the Orange Tree. Before you crucify me, this is a tentative DNF. I didn't really have a passionate reason to stop reading this. There wasn't anything wrong with it. Priory is a book with two sides, the West and the East. The West focuses on a very religious queendom that despises dragons, while the East is a secluded region that worships dragons. These two regions have lived separately for a long time now, until long thought to be gone evils awaken and threaten a repeat of past tragedies. In the West, we mostly follow a lady-in-waiting with a secret that compels her to protect the queen. In the East, we mostly focus on a girl aspiring to be a dragon rider, but there's like a lot of characters scattered around. I ended up stopping at chapter 15 because I realized that I have reached that chapter and I still did not give a single fuck about any of the characters. I did not dislike them and I was intrigued by the dragons. Actually, I love the dragons. They were my favorite part. But the characters themselves, I didn't give a damn about. Like, I really didn't care what happened to them. I wasn't worried about them. I didn't want to root for them. Unfortunately, my interest in the dragons was not as strong as my disinterest in the characters. I might pick this up again in the future because I am curious to see where they're going with it. It's just that at that point in time when I was reading this, I just didn't care. Okay, next book. Oh fuck, it's not here. Hold on. Our next contestant is the Beauty's Blade. Dude, This takes place in ancient China. Our MC Fu Wanqing is the heir to a righteous cultivation sect. Very pretty, very strong, very much a big headache to her father. You see, she is quite an immoral maverick. She just does what she wants, even if it doesn't suit the image of the sect. There's a lot of people pining for her, but there's only one person that piques her interest, and that is the high priestess of the demonic sect, Yu Shengyan. She is just as strong, if not stronger, and just as beautiful. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to be calling them Fu and Yu. Fu wants to fight Yu, but Yu's a nonchalant baddie who does not have time for nonsense like that. But Fu reveals that she has this medicine that can help Yu's comrade. Thus, they make a deal. Fu will give her the medicine if she stays by her side for 3 months. I was super excited when this was announced because this is a standalone Baihe novel, and if you have seen other Baihe or like Danmei novels, they all come with like a fucking 100 volumes. So a standalone 1-volume Baihe had me seated. When it comes to Chinese web novels, I am very used to characters having maximum stats. The mains are always going to be the hottest, the strongest, the richest, blah blah blah. But this one was just... this one was ridiculous. My qualms with their OPness is how constantly we are reminded of it to the point of being exasperating. Everyone around them wants them. There was this one scene where a man sought vengeance after MC ruined his job and reputation, only to immediately switch up after she smiles at him. Are you deadass? Perhaps I could have brushed it off had it had any interesting commentary to offer regarding beauty and men's lust. It did not. If there was any, it failed in being meaningful. Frankly, it reads like someone's Mary Sue DeviantArt OC. If that is your kind of junk food literature, no judgment here, you will enjoy this, but it is not mine. And now we have reached my last hurrah for my fantasy attempts. A Veil of Gods and Kings by Nicole Bailey. This is the first book of the Apollo Ascending tetralogy, a series reimagining the myth of Apollo and Hyacinthus. Before I get into my reasons for discontinuing this book, I will admit that it is almost entirely my fault that I did not enjoy this. I discovered this book by looking up recommendations for retellings of the myth of Hyacinthus. Upon discovering that this was a series, I got excited and immediately jumped into it without looking at the synopsis. Had I read the synopsis first, I would have never picked this up because I would have immediately guessed that it was not going to be for me. In Goodreads, it says it is a reimagining. To me, a reimagining strips it off the constraints for accuracy that retellings are bound to. You expect it to be different, and a reader's threshold for that difference varies. I tend to prefer accuracy to the original myth, but I also think it's important to offer a different perspective to a story every now and then. After all, these myths are old and have been told infinitely. For example, I love the Odyssey, but I also love Epic the Musical, even if it doesn't faithfully stick to the story and how the characters behaved. I love Song of Achilles, even if Patroclus was changed from being a warrior to a healer. Regardless of the changes made, I found those adaptations to resemble the original myths enough to be satisfying. It's crucial for me to offer that context, as some people may think that I judge the book unfairly. What I am about to explain is not really an objective take, but one almost entirely based on my preferences regarding adaptations. I think the author is well within their rights to adopt the myth whichever way they want, just as I have the right to not enjoy their spin on it. I still think such thoughts have merits, which is why I am going to give mine regardless. Also, I cannot tell if you can see the cover, but yeah. There were many red flags from the beginning. I was just really desperate for an adaptation on Hyacinthus that I persevered. I lasted up to 50%. First red flag, Apollo is half human. Not only that, he doesn't want to be a god. Right. He has a sister called Temi, who I assumed was an OC. Turned out to be Artemis. This book loves its nicknames, and I just don't think it really works. Second red flag, it is enemies to lovers. When I tell you, I was flabbergasted upon hearing Apollo express dislike for Hyacinthus. Putting aside the fact that I would have never bothered to read this if only I practiced due diligence, there were a few things that would have made me drop this book even if it was an original story. One of them was my struggle with sympathizing with Apollo's character. I just found him to be very insufferable. I thought that his reason for disliking Hyacinthus was kinda dumb. Light spoiler alert, but basically they met during this event where Zeus was present and Zeus kept comparing Apollo to Hyacinthus. If this was Apollo being depicted as a jealous prick, I would not have minded. I welcome annoying characters as long as the intention is to find them unlikable. I do not think that was the intention here. At least, not to the point of my dislike. Because you see, the revelation of why he disliked Hyacinthus was framed as though we are supposed to agree that Hyacinthus was somehow in the wrong. Apollo starts by explaining what I just said. Artemis says, well, that's not really Hyacinthus' fault, which, yeah, right, it's not Hyacinthus' fault. Apollo then says he thinks Hyacinthus was purposely making himself look good whenever he messes up. Hearing that, Artemis agrees that Hyacinthus sounds like an asshole. Yes, that is a direct quote. They talk quite modernly and it keeps taking me out of the story. I'm sorry, but no matter how you phrase it, Hyacinthus could not be blamed for any of that. There is just no way of spinning that situation to make Apollo look like he had a justified reason. Apollo's dislike for gods and godhood is rooted with their cruelty towards humans. He, more than anyone else, is aware of the power dynamics at play. Of course Hyacinthus wants to look good in front of a god that can kill him and his people with a snap. Unless he intentionally did something to ensure you messed up, any blame that falls on his shoulders is unjust. Finally, they reunite because of some stuff with the plot, and at some point, Apollo acts so insufferably that even the story has to acknowledge it. And I think, yes, let's go, development, yes. Not really. Even after acknowledging the points of his arrogance and his ignorance, Apollo continues to behave in a way that contradicts any suggestion of changing, in my opinion. There's just so much for me to complain about with this book. The romance I found really dull. The writing is unremarkable. I do not see why we have chapters narrated by Epiphany, an OC sister of Hyacinthus, etc. If you like this book, I'm glad for you. Personally, I would recommend looking elsewhere if you are looking for novels about Hyacinthus. I don't really see why the author didn't just go for an original story, to be honest. My fantasy run ending, I came home to the arms of literary fiction with Madonna in a fur coat. Another one of the internet's recent beloveds. I adore peripheral narrators, so I was really looking forward to this one. Plus, not to be a judge of books by their covers, but the cover is really eye-catching. Our primary narrator becomes colleagues with a shy older man named Raif Effendi. Raif appears to be a man letting life pass him by. While initially brushing Raif off, much like how their other colleagues do, our narrator finds himself intrigued by Raif and becomes determined to uncover the man beneath the shell. After a series of events, he comes in possession of Raif's journal, where he learns of the period where Raif lived in Berlin. People who enjoyed White Nights is likely to enjoy this book. Both books discuss the human ache of wanting to be understood by a world that seems so incapable of it, yet fearing such a possibility at the same time. I know this is often praised as the yearning book, the pick of real lovers and whatnot, and I get that. But I actually found myself less interested in the romance of the book, but more so on the dissection of our desires and the realities of it. That might be why I wasn't as heartbroken as a lot of people tended to be. I was captivated by Raif as a person rather than how Raif loved. I wanted to know how this man who is so afraid of living would live regardless of the romance. I enjoyed this book. I recommend it if such themes are to your liking. Otherwise, I think you might find it boring. And now for the last book, at least for this video. First Love by Ivan Turgenev. This is a novella. I devoured it in like an hour or two. A group of men are discussing their first love, and one of them gives his teenage story of falling in love with their new neighbor, a much older, coquettish woman. I did not like this very much. Don't get me wrong, I didn't dislike it, and I do like it. It's just I did not like this very much. I think reading back-to-back stories of melancholic romances with this dynamic of a man obsessed instantly with a capricious, coy woman took a chunk of my enjoyment away. It is a great portrait of youth in love, how passionate we become to the point of enduring the loss of our pride or individuality, how the person we love could demand the worst of us and all we could really do is grit our teeth and obey, how dangerous it is to be brave enough to offer one's heart to someone who could do whatever they please with it. The quality of Turgenev's writing is so edible and kept me reading even though I was kind of checking out. I can't really tell you why. I guess I was just not in the mood for this. I suppose there was meant to be a thrill or shock regarding the end, but I immediately knew that was coming. As in the instant we were introduced to this one character, I immediately said, oh, this is how it's going to go. I am 99.9% sure. There was no riddle to decipher in my experience, and I feel like that was a part of the enjoyment. Not really sure, but I was discussing the book with a friend, and she said she was like really gagged when that kind of ending was being hinted at. If you like White Nights or Madonna in a Fur Coat, you might be able to appreciate this one. I think I'm gonna reread this in the future just to see like how I feel after, because when I think about it, I really enjoyed it, but when I was reading it, I didn't really enjoy it that much. Anyways, that wraps up the books for this video. I'll try to get my thoughts on the 8 Georgia Hater books out next week or next week. Really had a lot of fun with her works. This pile, it's okay, it was alright. I'm currently filming this in June, and this month this month I'm going to be doing a themed reading. At least I hope I am. I rarely stick by my own plan, so I don't know. But yeah, that is all. Bye bye.